Look, try using this gesture when you're filling up your chest with air. Make that gesture with your hands like that, with your palms. Oh, so you feel it like starting down here in the stomach. See where I'm starting from? Down here. Sort of right above the belly button. Look where I'm starting. Right? Starting here. Because you really want to kind of be breathing up from the stomach, then through the diaphragm, and filling the chest with air.
By Rosalind's bright eyes, by her high forehead and her scarlet lip, by her fine foot, straight leg, and quivering thigh, and the dimensions that their adjacent lie, that in thy likeness thou appear to us.
That word scarlet. I noticed this yesterday, too, that it didn't have enough 5R in it.
A scarlet. A scarlet.
You know what that is, right? Scarlet?
Scarlet is kind of color. Purple.
Yeah, it's a bright red.
Bright red. Okay.
Yeah.
Scarlet.
This cannot anger him toward... I'm still leading with structural action, right? This cannot anger him toward anger him to raise a spirit in his mistress's circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it down and conjured it down. That were some spite. My invocation is fair and honest in his mistress's name. I conjure only but to raise up him.
Okay. This cannot anger him to anger him, to raise the spirit in his mistress to raise the spirit in his mistress circle of some strange nature, letting it there stand till she had laid it and conjured it down, that there was some spite. My invocation is fair and honest, and in his mistress' name I conjure only but to raise him up.
Best befits the dark. Moving into consonant energy leading now, and linking. If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. Go ahead.
If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit, as maids call medlars when they laugh alone, is what Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. In other words, stay out of it. Leave people alone when it comes to their religion.
The First Amendment guarantees that religion and government will be guarantees that religion and government will be separate. Congress cannot establish an official religion or interfere in the people's right to worship as they choose. The First Amendment I'll take it that far.
The First Amendment guarantees the religion and government will be separate. Congress cannot establish an official religion or interfere in the people's right to worship as they choose.
The First Amendment also protects other rights. Here's the full text. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now again, I'm doing that quick thing with the pacing here at the very start. The First Amendment also protects that part, right? Because I've said First Amendment now, half a dozen times. You're going to get it no matter how fast I say it. So it's a good place to really pick up speed and get right to the sense of the sentence, other rights.
The First Amendment also protects other rights. Here is the full text. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Grievances.
Yeah, and you got the intonation pattern not right for the second half of each of these contracts. Freedom of speech and freedom of speech have to have the same intonation, not different. They have to have the same intonation. Talking about the text of freedom of speech, there's the practice of freedom of speech.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
Do you hear the difference though? How you went down in a different direction at the end of the word speech. You've got to keep it just the same as the other freedom of speech. Comparing the text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
Right. You see the difference? You feel the difference? This is the thing that you keep going off on. A lot of times when you've got double contrast emphasis like this, you're not getting the right pitch pattern.
Okay.
Say it a few more times.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
Right. See how that works? That way you're really contrasting text and practice, and it makes crystal clear sense right away. The meaning of that comes across very strong. Text versus practice. Say it again.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
Right. And you see how if you gave any intonation at all to freedom of speech, that would detract from your main idea.
Yes.
Text of freedom of speech versus the practice of freedom of speech. Try it that way.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
No, try it faster. The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
The text of freedom of speech and the practice of freedom of speech.
It's another way to do it, speeding it up like that. And then again, that really is making text and practice really stand out. And that's all that needs to stand out. And even before there's the text of freedom of speech, there's the practice of freedom of speech.
And even before that, there is the text of freedom of speech, and there is the practice of the freedom of speech.
Yeah. The pitch jump that you did on practice wasn't quite right. Try it again.
And even before that, there is the text of freedom of speech, there is the practice of freedom of speech.
That's it. So actually, both text and practice are operative words. Practice needs to be at a little higher pitch, right?
Because the practice is more than
because it's kind of overriding. It's saying that this is more important. This is more important even than text. So you've got to go. You've got to make that the practice jump in pitch a little higher pitch.
There is the practice of freedom of speech. There is a
Oh, very
practice.
good. You did the second half. Yeah.
There is the practice of the freedom of speech. Mm.
And before there's the text of freedom of speech, there's the practice of freedom of speech.
And even before that, there is the text of freedom of speech. There is the practice of freedom of speech.
Really makes the ideas very clear. See, that's why it's important for you to get a good feeling for this intonation pattern. Let's take a couple minutes just for small talk, because I'd like to practice that with you too.
Okay.
And carry over, all the practice and energy and intonation and linking and phrasing and pitch and tempo rhythms. Carry it all over into this just small talk conversation. So we had a lot of snow. I just dug out the wood pile today. That was like a one-day job, just digging out all the snow that had gathered around the wood pile, because it came up in a big drift up against the side of the wood pile. So that was a one day's work. But yesterday I got most of it done, actually. I got the driveway and the car. The car was completely buried under a drift of snow also. So I got the driveway dug out yesterday, even though it was quite windy.
You didn't hire someone to do it for you? A few times, even in Japan, some parents left their babies in the car, and
Oh, yeah?
and the baby was found dead, actually, because of the carbon monoxide intoxication. So I wonder whether it's a good idea to keep yourself in the car during crisis.
I guess not. Well, they say if you get stranded, that you're safest to remain in your car. You know what I mean by stranded, right? If your car gets, where it's stuck in the snow somewhere. More people die by leaving the car to go, unless it's somewhere obvious they can see, a house or something to go to. If just walking away from the car, more people die. Partly because they say it's easier to find you, rescuers. It's easier to find you. To find your car than it is to find you out walking in the woods.
Oh, but that's a different case during tsunami.
But that's in terms of using your car without the heater. That's just using it as a shelter. And I read somewhere it's okay, like plan on just 5 minutes an hour, they say. Turn on the engine just 5 minutes an hour.
I mean, in Japan, there were many cases where using car after the earthquake to run away from the tsunami would be a bad experience, because there was congestion in the roads and they can't run away. So the best thing to do is to leave the car there and just run up to a hill or mountain.
So, is there anything else that you want to say? Anything you want to say about this article we read?
I wonder why they put the freedom of religion so important, because I think there are different branches, what they call Catholics, Christians, and they're always fighting with each other.
Different branches, and the word they use for that in religions.
Different, what do you call? Denominations. Denominations.
Right.
Yes. That happens in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong I was confused why there were two denominations. I was in the Christian schools, but there are also the Catholic schools, and we found that the teachings are slightly different and the rituals are different.